Tonight, I will tell you a quiet story about the power of the morning. It is a story about a boy named Leo and a village lost in the fog. But on this particular morning, something in the air was not normal. The village of gray mist was a silent place. It sat at the bottom of a deep valley, surrounded by mountains so high that they seemed to touch the stars. Because of these giant stone walls, the sun never truly shone on the village. There was only a gray, heavy twilight. The air was always damp, and the ground was always cold. The people of the village were heavy with sleep. They did not run. They walked slowly, dragging their feet on the cobblestones. They did not shout. They whispered. In the village of gray mist, the bed was the most important place in the world. People slept until noon, worked for a few lazy hours, and then returned to their warm blankets. They were comfortable, but they were not free. Leo was a young man who lived in a small, crooked house near the edge of town. For all his life, Leo was just like his neighbors. He loved the soft warmth of his pillow. He loved to close his eyes and ignore the world outside. But today, the silence felt different. The thick gray fog pressed against his bedroom window, like a ghost. Leo woke up in the dark. His room was freezing cold. His body felt heavy like a stone, begging him to go back to sleep. But he could not close his eyes. A strange feeling was growing in his chest, a feeling of restlessness. He stared at the dark ceiling. The clock on his wall had stopped ticking years ago, so he did not know the time. He only knew that he was awake, while everyone else was lost in dreams. He did not know it yet, but on this quiet morning, everything was about to change. A dream is a heavy thing to carry, especially when everyone around you has empty hands. Later that morning, Leo went to the village tavern. It was a dark, wooden building where the villagers gathered to drink warm tea and complain about the cold. The atmosphere was thick with smoke and the smell of damp wool. Leo sat with his friends, Silas and Jaron. They were good men, but their eyes were dull, like extinguished candles. "My back hurts," Silas grumbled, leaning against the wall. "I need to go back to bed soon." Leo held his cup tightly. The warmth felt good against his cold fingers, but his mind was burning with the thoughts from his morning. "Silas," Leo said softly, "do you ever wonder why we sleep so much? Do you ever wonder if there is something more than this gray fog?" The table went quiet. Jaron stopped drinking. Silas looked at Leo with a confused expression. Then he laughed. It was a loud, dry sound. "More?" Silas asked, wiping his mouth. "Leo, look outside. There is the fog. There is the mud. And there is work. That is the world. Don't be foolish." "But the book I found," Leo started to say. "Books are for dreaming," Jaron interrupted, his voice sharp. "And dreams make you tired. Drink your tea, Leo. Forget about the morning." Leo looked around the tavern. Everywhere, he saw people with their heads down, speaking in muffled voices. He realized that the fog was not just outside. It was inside them, too. It was a fog of giving up. He felt a sudden wave of loneliness. He was sitting with his friends, but he had never felt more alone. He stood up, leaving his tea unfinished. "I need some air," he whispered. Leo walked away from the tavern and the houses. He walked until he reached the very edge of the village, where the cobblestone street turned into dirt. There, rising up into mist, was the beginning of the old path. The elders said this path once led to the top of the mountain, but no one had walked it for 100 years. Leo looked at it closely. It was not really a path anymore. It was a mess of sharp, gray thorns and twisted weeds. The plants were thick and ugly, entangled together like a wall. They looked dangerous. Leo reached out his hand to touch a thorny branch. It scratched his finger, and a drop of red blood appeared. He pulled his hand back quickly. It would be painful to clear this path. It would take hours, maybe days, of hard work in the freezing cold. He looked back at the village. The lights were dim. It looked safe. It looked easy. He looked at the mountain again. The gray thorn seemed to warn him. Go back. Stay asleep. Leo felt a knot of fear in his stomach. He thought the thorns were his enemy, but he was wrong. Something much stronger than thorns was waiting for him in the dark. To change your life, you must first fight the night. Leo made a decision. He would not wait for the village to wake up. He would clear the path himself. He told himself it would be easy, but he was very wrong. The next morning, Leo woke up 2 hours before the usual time. His room was freezing. His blanket felt heavy and warm, like a soft trap trying to keep him in bed. It took all his determination to throw the blanket off and put his feet on the cold floor. He washed his face with icy water, grabbed a rusty metal tool from his shed, and walked to the edge of the village. For the first hour, he felt strong. He cut the thorns. He pulled the heavy weeds. He moved the gray rocks. But soon, the cold air bit his lungs. His hands blistered and bled. His back shouted in agony. By the time the village bell rang for noon, Leo had only cleared 3 meters of the path. Just 3 meters. It looked pathetic against the giant mountain. This continued for 3 days. Every morning was a battle against his own body. On the 4th morning, Leo made a mistake. He sat down on a rock to rest for just 1 minute. When he opened his eyes, the sky was already lighter. He had fallen asleep in the dirt for an hour. He felt foolish. He looked at his hands. They were raw and dirty. He looked at the village. It was still silent, still asleep. A dark thought entered his mind. Why am I doing this? He thought. No one is watching. No one cares. Silas and Jaren are warm in their beds. I am out here in the mud, bleeding for a path that goes nowhere. I am just a fool with a rusty tool. The fog seemed to thicken around him, whispering that he should give up. The work was too hard, and the progress was invisible. Leo dropped his tool into the wet grass. The metal made a dull, sad sound. He was ready to quit. He turned his back on the mountain, ready to walk home and sleep forever. He closed his eyes to give up, but then, underneath the sound of the wind, he heard a low whisper coming from the mountain. The most dangerous trap is not made of iron. It is made of comfort, and on this day, the trap snapped shut. Leo stood frozen on the path. The whisper he heard was not a voice. It was the wind, but it was not a normal wind. High above on the mountain peaks, a dark, heavy cloud was forming. It was not the usual gray mist. It was black, thick, and moving fast. It looked like an avalanche of shadows rolling down toward the village. Leo dropped his tool and ran back toward the houses. Wake up, he shouted. Something is coming. But his voice was swallowed by the wind. The black fog hit the village silently. It did not break windows or knock down doors. Instead, it slid through the cracks and under the doors. It filled the streets with an unnatural, heavy silence. Leo ran to Silas's window and looked inside. Silas was in his bed, but he did not look like he was resting. His face was pale, and his breathing was incredibly slow. Leo banged on the glass. Silas, get up. But Silas did not move. He was not just sleeping. He was unconscious. The fog was suffocating the village with a deep, magical slumber. Leo realized the terrifying truth. The old stories were real. This was eternal sleep. If the sun did not return today, the people of the village of gray mist would never wake up again. They would sleep until they died. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He was tired. His legs shook. He wanted to run into his own house, hide under his blanket, and let the fog take him, too. It would be so easy to close his eyes. No, he thought, clenching his fists. If I sleep, we all die. He ran to his shed and grabbed a coil of rope, a lantern, and his heavy coat. He did not look at his warm bed. He did not look at his clock. There was no time to plan. There was no time to be afraid. He ran back to the edge of the village, where the thorny path disappeared into the black fog. The wind roared like a monster. The safety of his old life was gone. He took one last look at his small, dark house, knowing that he might never sleep in it again. Then he turned his back on the village and stepped into the storm. The mountain did not want to be climbed. It felt like a living beast that was angry at the intruder. First, Leo had to pass through the forest of whispers. The trees here were twisted and black, looking like frozen skeletons. The wind blew through the branches with a strange, high-pitched sound. To Leo's ears, the wind sounded like voices. Go back. Leo, the wind seemed to whisper. It is too far. You are too weak. Sleep, just sleep. It was a terrible illusion. Leo knew it was just the wind, but it sounded exactly like his own fear. He covered his ears with his frozen hands and kept walking above the forest. The path disappeared into the wall of ice. This was the most treacherous part of the journey. The ground was steep and slippery. The cold was not just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. It bit through Leo's heavy coat and made his skin feel numb. He could not feel his toes. He could hardly feel his fingers. He fell into a rhythm to keep moving. Step, pull, breath. Step, pull, breath. Suddenly, his right boot slipped on a patch of smooth ice. Leo fell hard against the sharp rocks. Crack! A terrible pain shot through his knee. He slid down the path, clawing at the snow, until he stopped near the edge of a cliff. He lay there in the snow, gasping for air. His leg throbbed with agony. Tears froze on his cheeks. I cannot do this, he whispered to the ice. I am just a gardener. I am not a hero. He closed his eyes. The black fog below was calling him. It would be so easy to lie here and never wake up. But then an image flashed in his mind. He saw old Mara's face, gray and lifeless. He saw his friends trapped in their silent houses. If he stopped now, their story ended. The pain in his leg was bad, but the pain of letting them die was worse. With a scream of effort, Leo forced himself to stand up. He did not walk fast anymore. He limped. He dragged his injured leg through the deep snow, inch by inch. He climbed for what felt like hours, until the air grew thin and hard to breathe. He saw the edge of the summit above him. He reached up to grab the final rock, desperate to pull himself over the top. He lunged forward, but his hand grabbed only empty air. The top of the world was not what he expected. It was not a place of glory. It was a place of deathly silence. Leo's hand clawed at the snow, and he pulled his heavy body over the final ledge. He collapsed onto a flat, rocky plateau. He had done it. He had climbed the forbidden peak. But there was no cheering crowd to welcome him. There was only the wind and the great bell. The bell stood in the center of the plateau, hanging from a massive stone arch. It was enormous, made of black iron that had turned green with age. It looked ancient and forgotten. The rope that hung from it was thick and stiff, frozen by centuries of ice. Leo tried to stand up, but his legs refused to move. The air up here was thin, and his lungs burned with every breath. Suddenly, the black fog that had chased him up the mountain swirled over the edge of the cliff. It did not look like mist anymore. It looked like a living creature. It wrapped around Leo's ankles. It felt heavy, like a warm, soft blanket weighing him down. A powerful desire to sleep washed over him. It was stronger than the cold. It was stronger than the pain. The fog whispered in his mind, "You have climbed the mountain, Leo. You have won. Now you can rest. Just close your eyes for a moment." Leo's eyelids fluttered. The snow beneath him felt as comfortable as a feather bed. Yes, he thought, I earned this rest. Just 1 minute. He started to lower his head, but as his cheek touched the ice, he remembered the silence of the village. He remembered the children who would never wake up to play. No, the thought screamed in his mind, I am tired. I am so tired, but I am not finished. With a roar of anger, Leo forced his body to move. He crawled across the ice toward the bell. The fog tried to hold him back, making his arms feel like lead. Every inch was a war. He reached the frozen rope. He grabbed it with his bleeding hands. The rope was as hard as stone. He pulled, but the bell did not move. The rust and ice held it tight. The mechanism was corroded. Leo wrapped the rope around his wrists. He planted his feet on the slippery rock. He closed his eyes and summoned every ounce of strength he had left in his spirit. He did not pull for himself. He pulled for Silas. He pulled for Jaren. He pulled for the morning. Wake up! He screamed into the void. He threw his entire weight backward. The ice cracked. The metal groaned. And then, for the first time in 100 years, the great bell moved. The sound was not loud like thunder. It was deep like the heartbeat of the earth. Doom! The vibration traveled down the rope, through Leo's tired arms, and into the mountain itself. For a second, nothing happened. The black fog still swirled around him. Leo fell to his knees, gasping for air, afraid that he had failed. But then the world began to break. The sound wave hit the thick wall of fog. It did not blow the mist away. It shattered it. Like a giant mirror falling to the floor, the black cloud cracked and fell apart into 1,000,000 tiny pieces. Suddenly, a line of pure, golden fire appeared on the horizon. Leo shielded his eyes. It was blindingly bright. The sun rose slowly, magnificent and unstoppable. It burned through the remaining gray mist, turning the sky from a dull charcoal color to a vibrant, brilliant blue. Leo felt a sensation he had never felt before, warmth. The golden light touched his frozen face. It melted the ice on his coat. It soaked into his skin, chasing away the cold that had lived in his bones for 20 years. He closed his eyes and smiled. The pain in his leg seemed to fade away. Far below, in the valley, the miracle was happening. The sound of the bell woke the villagers from their magical sleep. They stumbled out of their houses, rubbing their eyes. Silas looked up. Jaren looked up. Old Mara looked up. They did not see the gray ceiling of fog that had covered them for their whole lives. Instead, they saw the mountain, and standing at the very top, tiny against a giant sun, was the silhouette of a boy who refused to sleep. The fog evaporated like a bad dream. The village of gray mist was not gray anymore. The rooftops shone red. The grass looked green. The world was full of color. Leo looked down at his home. He realized the truth then. The sun had not died. The sun had always been there, waiting behind the clouds. The darkness was not a curse in the sky. It was a choice they had made by staying asleep. The morning had not returned because of magic. It returned because one person had the discipline to wake up and ring the bell. Let us look at Leo's journey one more time, to remember the lesson clearly. Once, there was a village called Gray Mist. It was a sad place because the sun never shone there. The people were always tired. They slept late, worked little, and lived in the dark. Leo was a young man in this village. He felt the same heaviness as everyone else, but he had a dream. He wanted to see the morning light. Leo decided to clear the old path to the mountain. It was very difficult. The thorns scratched him, and the cold wind hurt his face. His friends laughed at him. They said, "Go back to bed, Leo. There is no sun." But Leo did not listen. He practiced discipline. He woke up early every day to work. One day, a dangerous black fog came to the village. It was a magical fog that made everyone fall into a deep, endless sleep. Leo was the only one awake. He knew he had to save them. He left his warm home and started to climb the forbidden peak. The journey was painful. The mountain was full of ice and shadows. Leo fell and hurt his leg. He was cold, lonely, and afraid. A voice in his head told him to give up. It told him to lie down in the snow and sleep. But Leo remembered his friends. He kept moving. Finally, he reached the top of the world. He saw the great bell. It was frozen and heavy. Leo was exhausted, but he used his last strength to pull the rope. He pulled, and the bell rang loud and clear. The sound of the bell broke the black fog. The clouds disappeared and the sun rose. The golden light touched the village, and everyone woke up. They saw the beautiful world for the first time. Leo learned an important truth that day. The sun was always there, waiting behind the clouds. The darkness was not permanent. The light returned because one person decided to wake up and ring the bell. My name is Mara, and I am the oldest woman in the village of Gray Mist. Because I have gray hair and many wrinkles, the people call me Wise Mara. But I must tell you the truth. I was not wise. I was just tired. For years, I sat by my small window, watching the gray fog swirl in the street. I remembered the stories of the sun from my grandmother, but I believed they were just fairy tales. I believed the world was meant to be dark. I believed that hoping for light was a waste of energy. I watched Leo every morning. I saw him leave his house when the rest of us were still sleeping. I saw him carrying his rusty tools to the edge of the village. I saw his bleeding hands and his dirty clothes. Do you know what I thought when I saw him? I did not think, "Look at that brave boy." No, I thought, "Look at that fool." I felt pity for him. I told my neighbors, "He is fighting against nature. The mountain cannot be climbed. He should accept the grayness." Just like me, I thought my cynicism was wisdom. I thought my giving up was maturity. Then came the day of the black fog. I remember the cold. It went deep into my bones. When the sleep took me, I did not fight it. I closed my eyes and thought, "Finally, it is over." I was ready to sleep forever. But then, the sound, it started as a vibration in the floorboards. Then it became a ringing in the air. Boom! It was the voice of the mountain, screaming at us to wake up. I opened my eyes. I stumbled out my door. And then I saw it. The light. It was so bright that it hurt my old eyes. It was not gray. It was gold. It was fire. It was life. I fell to my knees in the mud and covered my face, shaking with fear and joy. I looked up at the peak, and I saw a tiny shadow standing against the sun. It was Leo, the boy I had laughed at, the boy I had pitied. Tears ran down my wrinkled cheeks. I realized then that I had been wrong for 80 years. The world was not dark because the sun was gone. The world was dark because we were too lazy to look for it. I thought he was a fool for climbing. But standing there in the warm, beautiful light, I knew the truth. I was the fool for staying at the bottom. And so, the story of Leo and the village of gray mist comes to an end. The people there learned that the sun had never left them. They had simply forgotten to look for it. But this story is not really about a village in a legend. It is about you. And it is about tomorrow morning. In our real lives, we do not have a magical black fog, but we have other things that cloud our minds. We have the heavy blanket that feels too warm. We have the alarm clock that we want to silence. We have the quiet voice in our head that says, just 5 more minutes. Just start tomorrow. Leo's mountain was made of ice and rock. Your mountain might be different. Maybe your mountain is learning English. Maybe it is exercising. Maybe it is working on a difficult project. The climb is never easy. There will always be thorns, and there will always be cold winds telling you to stop. But remember Leo. He was not a wizard. He was not a soldier. He was just a gardener who made a choice. He realized that the light does not come to those who wait in the dark. The light comes to those who climb. Here is the simple truth to keep in your heart. The miracle of the morning is not that the sun rises. The miracle is that you rise to meet it. Every morning when your eyes open, you are standing at the bottom of the path. You can choose the fog, or you can choose the bell. I hope you choose to ring the bell. A small request for you. If this story brought a little light to your day, or if it helped you practice your English, please click the like button. It helps our community grow. If you want to hear more stories like this to improve your listening and vocabulary, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. And finally, I want to hear from you. Write a comment below. What is a mountain you're trying to climb right now? Is it English? Is it a new job? Let us support each other in the comments. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful morning and keep climbing.